Part 4. Looking through Dad's things in journal. The next early evening. After I gave an owl my response letter to Harry, I decided to go to Dad's office to review some things. Since Severus suggested this, maybe there's something he wants me to read instead of it coming from his mouth. If Severus was going to move Dad's things eventually, I probably should at least go through some of it. Taking a deep breath, I sighed and walked into the room to his desk. I sat down in his chair and laid my finger along the edge of the desk. I noticed 4 pictures with me and Dad together in small frames were on the top of the desk in the right corner. One of them was when I was a toddler, and he held my hand while I was in the water on the beach. Another was taken here on my first day at Hogwarts. The third one was when he was holding me in his arms as a baby, sleeping and holding his finger. The last picture was taken only 2 years ago at our private home on Christmas Eve. I felt my eyes watering as I smiled in awe, staring at the pictures and thinking of the memories. "I'm so glad you kept these pictures, Dad," I thought to myself. I sighed deeply as I tried my best to keep my composure and not break down again. I honestly can't tell you why I'm such an emotional person like this. I don't bloody know. But I am glad that Dad kept all of these pictures. I guess it shows how important I was to him. I was his only child after all. I slowly opened up one of the drawers and pulled out the first thing I saw in it. My eyes widened as I muttered, "Good Lord, it's Tom Riddle's diary from when Harry recovered it in the Chamber of Secrets. With Voldemort appeared as a young version of himself and used Ginny. I didn't know that Dad kept this since then." I placed the diary on the desk as I saw a ring that he used to wear for a long time. I honestly don't know why he wore it until he took it off one day. Next, I saw the friendship bracelet I made for Father's Day when I was 8 years old. He wore the rest of it that school year, praising it to everyone and the teachers, saying I made it for him as a gift. I smiled at the thought memory, knowing how much Dad liked this homemade gift for me. I didn't take it off for such a long time, and later he told me he would always keep it. Seems like he kept it after all, and in a place where he could visually see it whenever he wanted. Underneath the bracelet was a small book of what looked like to be a journal of some sort. "I wonder if this is it," I muttered to myself. I picked it up from the drawer and opened it to see his handwriting. "Yeah, this was Dad's journal, just like Severus said," I stated softly. I started to scan through some things he wrote, like his thoughts, different events, and about me as well. He even wrote about the night Lily and James Potter died and how Harry became known as the boy who lived. I flipped through the journal some as I stopped on one of the pages, seeing something I wasn't expecting to see. It was about the day my mother died when I was a baby. I truly didn't think he would write about something like this. After being away for the day, I came home expecting to be greeted by Paige and Amelia. Instead, it was something so horrid and an image I'll forever be taxed in my brain. I took a breath as I kept reading. The place was a mess, everything's out of place, and the building's wrecked. I kept calling out for Amelia as I didn't see her anywhere. As I got closer to the nursery, I heard cries of terror coming from Paige. I ran in to see Amelia dead on the floor, and Paige looking so distraught in her crib. My heart stopped beating for a second as fear, worry, and hatred took over me. The mother of my child is gone. I immediately knew this had to be the work of Voldemort. I murmured Paige's name as she started hollering, seeing my sight. I bent down to Amelia's body as I grabbed her hand and started to cry. I leaned down, kissed her forehead, and closed her eyes. "I'm so sorry, love," I muttered to her. Poor Amelia. She didn't deserve this. She was a good mother, a good and caring person. She was lighthearted and full of life. Despite everything of her knowing my darkest truth, she still loved and cared for me and wanted to have a child. At the end of it all, I loved and cared for her. Once I stood up, Paige looked at me in total hysterics. I immediately grabbed her and got her out of the crib. I held her tightly as I rocked her, trying to get her to stop crying and calm down a little. My baby girl's life is going to change now forever. Unexpectedly, having a child is one thing I'll never regret in this life. She's absolutely precious, a beautiful soul and a small light that I didn't know I needed. I took a deep breath as tears formed in my eyes, not realizing how affected Dad was over losing Mom, but was more concerned about me than himself. Never did I realize how much I meant to him and how much he needed me. He may not have always said such sweet things, but I know more than anything that Dad loved me. I continued reading. With her tightly against me, I looked at Paige as she stared at me. I glanced, trying to make sure she wasn't hurt anywhere at all. She didn't have a scar, scratch, or bruise on her. I silently thanked myself for the fact that my baby girl wasn't hurt. She's not physically hurt, at least. But I know that she'll emotionally be hurt. She may not know it will, but I know as she grows up, there will be that emotional pain, the type of emotional pain that one cannot escape. I'll have to be honest with her when the time comes and not let her hold anything back. I watched as Paige looked at me with tears in my eyes and the rage that I held within them. I didn't want to scare her even more than she already was. So I took a few deep breaths and calmed myself down enough to change my facial expression. Once she noticed or saw that I was fully calm, she seemed to slowly stop crying. I must have scared her. I didn't mean to. Either I scared her or she somehow felt that I wasn't all right. I wiped her face from the tears and got rid of her boogers. Then I heard her tiny and soft voice mutter, "Mama." It took every inch of my power not to break down then and there. I felt a tear fall down my face as I looked down at my child, a baby, who seemed to mutter her first word. She's still too young to even learn words or form them, yet she spoke in the smallest and most heartbreaking way I could imagine as a parent. I know this moment will be the most upset I'll ever be. My child watched her mother be killed by the most terrible man in front of her eyes. I looked up from the journal as my chest felt tight, almost like I couldn't breathe. A couple of tears suddenly fell down my face as I sighed to myself. Dad and I had a heart-to-heart talk about Mom's death one day, but he never told me how he felt in depth like this. Unless this is why he kept and wrote a journal, for me to learn these things when I was ready or when I absolutely needed to. I sat and continued to read more about his complicated life and the events that took place. After all, I don't know much about Dad besides what he told me over the years or what other people have told me. I barely even knew for a while that he had a brother and I had an uncle. Little did I even know much about my family. Dad wouldn't talk about it at all. I remember when Dad finally told me about Uncle Aberforth, but I called him Uncle Abe since I met him. Dad said that Uncle Abe got to meet me and hold me when I was really small, but I may not remember. Since Dad wouldn't talk about our family ancestors, Uncle Abe swore me to secrecy for not telling Dad that he had told me. Uncle Abe told me the dark truths of what occurred. Even after everything, I still loved my father. For all I know, they probably barely spoke unless it concerned me. It seemed like Harry didn't know much about my father either, even if he thought he did. This came to light as time went by, but especially when we attended Bill and Fleur's wedding, and people who knew Dad was there. They knew about me and Harry, but we didn't know them. Harry still loved him and looked up to him. So did I. He wasn't just my father, but also my best friend. I stopped on a page of the journal as I read about how Dad found a Horcrux of Voldemort's. It was a ring. But apparently something went wrong, and it created a black look on his hand. So that explains the look on his hand, but there's nothing else. I wonder if Severus knows. On another page, it was on how and when Dad thought he would die. Severus was right all along, and he wasn't lying. He was forced to kill Dad under orders by Voldemort, seeing how Draco couldn't. He knew Voldemort wanted him dead and ordered Draco to murder him. I read how Severus got emotional when Dad told him he had to kill him. I read more of what Dad wrote. I've never seen Severus so emotional like this, except when Lily died. Yet, his life's complicated and he's faithful to me. What about Paige, Albus? He asked. I told him that Paige would eventually figure things out and discover the real reason behind my death. If anything, tell her to search for my journal, Severus. I know how heartbroken Paige will be after I die and how things will never be the same for her and young Harry. After all, I love them both and I always fear pure happiness with my daughter. Someday, everything will make sense, but all in due time. I only hope she knows when the time is right for her to know certain things. I want Severus to see some light on love, but I know he'll never let Lily go. I made a life promise with Severus to protect Paige until he dies, and I know he'll honor that. If they still want to be together, they have my blessing. All I want and ask is for my only child and daughter to be happy with her friends and find true love of her own. I know she'll mourn over my death, but I also know that the light will meet the darkness. I love you, Paige Allison Dumbledore. You are my daughter, best friend, and my baby girl. I've always loved you since you were born, and forever, I'll love you in death. Tears started rolling down my face as I looked up to see Minerva in the doorway. Thank you for tuning in to this part. Stay tuned soon for the next part.